Imagine waking up in a hospital bed, your body shattered, your baby's fighting for life, and your husband, he's not holding your hand. He's proposing to another woman in the hospital chapel. While you're bleeding out, they say rock bottom teaches you who you really are. But for Victoria Hastings, rock bottom wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a war for her children, her name, her life. Stay with me, because what happens when her billionaire father walks through that courtroom door will leave you speechless. If you believe in justice, second chances, and stories that make your heart race, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful true story dramas like this one. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The heart monitor's steady beep suddenly became frantic. Victoria Hastings could hear it even through the fog of medication and pain. Somewhere beyond the blue surgical drape blocking her view, Dr. Walsh was saying something urgent. BP dropping, 80 over 40. Get me another unit, now. Possible hysterectomy if we can't control this bleeding. Victoria tried to focus on the ceiling tiles above her. She'd been counting them earlier, before the contractions became unbearable, before the emergency, before everything went wrong. Derek, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Where's Derek? The nurse beside Lauren, her best friend from college who'd pulled every string to be assigned to this delivery, squeezed her hand but didn't answer. Victoria knew what that meant. He was gone. Again. 90 seconds earlier, in the hospital chapel 3 floors down, Derek Morrison had been on one knee. The diamond ring caught the soft light filtering through stained glass windows. Cassidy Blake, 28 years old with blonde hair and tears of joy streaming down her face, looked at the man she thought she'd been waiting 2 years to marry. After everything we've been through, Derek said, his voice thick with emotion that was absolutely genuine because he believed his own lies. After all the waiting, all the obstacles, you're finally going to be my wife. The small crowd of witnesses, Derek's co-workers, Cassidy's friends from the elementary school where she taught, applauded. Someone popped a bottle of champagne. Plastic cups were filled and passed around. This was it. The moment Cassidy had dreamed about since meeting Derek at that conference 8 months ago. What Cassidy didn't know was that 4 floors above them, Derek's actual wife was bleeding out on an operating table. 3 premature babies, daughters Lily and Emma, son Jack, were being rushed to isolates in the NICU, their tiny bodies struggling with their first breaths. And the woman who'd carried them for 7.5 months was dying. Back in the operating room, the machine screamed. We're losing her, someone said. Then the long, flat tone that meant her heart had stopped. Clear. Victoria felt her body jolt, felt herself come back from wherever she'd been drifting, heard her own heartbeat resume, slower but steady. We've got her back. Okay, we've got her. Lauren was crying, Victoria realized. Her best friend's tears were landing on Victoria's hospital gown. The babies, Victoria managed to ask. All 3 are stable, small but fighting. They're going to be okay. Derek? This time Lauren couldn't hide it. Her face hardened with a rage Victoria had never seen on her friend's gentle features. He left, said he couldn't handle the blood and walked out. But that wasn't the worst of it. Lauren didn't mention what she'd seen on her break 15 minutes ago when she'd gone to the chapel to pray for Victoria's life. She didn't mention Derek Morrison on one knee with another woman. Not yet. Not while Victoria was still on the operating table. We're getting the bleeding under control, Dr. Walsh announced. Her voice held relief, but also exhaustion. No hysterectomy. You're going to be okay, Victoria. 2 hours later, Victoria woke up in recovery. Her body felt like it had been hit by a truck. Everything hurt. The epidural had worn off and the pain medication wasn't quite enough. But she was alive. And somewhere in this hospital, 3 tiny humans needed her. The room was empty except for a nurse checking her vitals. Where's my husband? Victoria asked. The nurse's expression flickered with something Victoria couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or awkwardness. He stepped out. I'll see if I can find him. Victoria's phone sat on the bedside table, but she didn't have the strength to reach for it. Instead, her eyes landed on something else. Derek's phone. He'd left it behind when he ran from the OR. It sat there innocently, screen dark. Her hand shook as she picked it up. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't look, but something in her gut, Some instinct that had been whispering warnings for months made her thumb press the home button. The password screen appeared. Victoria typed in their wedding date, December 18th, 2018. The phone unlocked. The first thing she saw was a text thread labeled babe with a heart emoji and a fire emoji. Victoria's actual contact name in Derek's phone was just Victoria. No emoji, no nickname. She opened the thread, a son. Today, 1 hour ago, she's out of surgery. Meet me at the chapel. Time to make this official. Response, on my way. I can't believe it's finally happening. Victoria scrolled up with trembling fingers. Yesterday. Tomorrow's the day. By tomorrow night, you'll have a ring and I'll be free. 1 month ago, after the birth, I'll file for divorce. She'll be too overwhelmed to fight it. 2 months ago, one more trimester of pretending. Then I'm all yours. 3 months ago, can't wait until she has those babies and we can finally be together. The messages went back 8 months. 8 months of planning. 8 months of lies. Photos filled the thread. A blonde woman in Victoria's apartment, in Victoria's bed, wearing Victoria's bathrobe. Victoria's hand shook so violently that she dropped the phone. It clattered on the tile floor. She grabbed for the plastic basin beside her bed, just in time to vomit. That's when Lauren walked back in. She took one look at Victoria's face, at the phone, on the floor, and she knew. You found out, Lauren said quietly. Where is he? Victoria's voice sounded hollow, not like her own. Where's Derek? Lauren hesitated. Victoria could see the war playing out on her friend's face, whether to tell the truth or protect her. Tell me. Hospital chapel. There's a woman, blonde. She's wearing a ring. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria stared at her best friend, trying to process what she just heard. Derek had proposed to someone else, while Victoria was in surgery, while she was dying, while their 3 children fought for their first breaths in the NICU. Take me there, Victoria said. Tori, you can't. You just had major surgery. You're barely stable. Take me there right now or I'll go myself. Lauren knew that tone. She'd heard it exactly once before, 7 years ago, when Victoria had told her billionaire father that she was marrying Derek Morrison with or without his blessing. Victoria Hastings didn't bluff. Okay, Lauren said, but if you pass out, I'm bringing you straight back. Lauren helped Victoria into a wheelchair. The movement sent sharp pains through Victoria's abdomen, but she bit down on her lip and didn't make a sound. The catheter bag was visible, hanging from the side of the wheelchair. Blood-spotted bandages showed through her thin hospital gown. She didn't care. Let them see. The elevator ride took forever. 3 floors down felt like 300. Victoria kept seeing those text messages in her mind. 8 months. He'd been planning this for 8 months. The chapel doors were solid oak, beautiful and imposing. Victoria could hear voices and laughter from inside. Lauren pushed the wheelchair forward and the doors swung open. The laughter died immediately. Derek Morrison stood in the center of a small crowd, his arm around a beautiful blonde woman who wore a diamond ring that caught the light. Champagne glasses, cameras, smiling faces, all of it froze when Victoria appeared in the doorway. Congratulations on your engagement, Victoria said. Her voice was eerily calm, detached, like she was commenting on the weather. Derek's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, fear, calculation. Then something that looked almost like relief, like he was glad he didn't have to keep pretending anymore. Babe, this isn't what it looks like, he started. The blonde woman, Cassidy, Victoria knew from the messages, turned to look at Derek, confusion written all over her face. Derek, who is this? Cassidy asked. I'm his wife, Victoria said clearly. The one who just had emergency surgery an hour ago. The one who almost died. The one who gave birth to his 3 children while he was down here buying you that ring. Cassidy's face drained of all color. She looked at the ring on her finger like it had turned into a snake. Wife? Cassidy's voice rose. You said you were divorced. You showed me papers. You said... He's a liar, Victoria interrupted. She pulled Derek's phone from her lap and threw it. It skidded across the floor and stopped at his feet. 8 months of messages, planning this whole thing, planning our divorce before our babies were even born. The crowd of witnesses began backing away, sensing the situation was not what they'd thought. Someone quietly set down their champagne glass and headed for the door. Derek's mask finally slipped. The charming smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculated. "You know what?" he said. "Fine, yes, I'm with Cassidy. Yes, I want a divorce. And you know what else? You're going to pay me." He pulled folded papers from inside his suit jacket. Victoria recognized the letterhead of a law firm, an expensive one. "Emergency custody petition, filed this morning while you were in surgery. You're medically unstable. Look at you, attacking your mom in a chapel, and you're homeless." "What are you talking about?" Victoria asked, though dread was already pooling in her stomach. Derek smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I stopped paying rent 4 months ago. Our apartment was foreclosed 2 weeks ago. Your stuff is on the street right now. You have nothing, Victoria. No home, no job. You quit, remember? No money in your personal account because I made sure of that." The room spun. The room. Victoria gripped the armrest of her wheelchair to keep from swaying. "So here's what's going to happen," Derek continued, his voice taking on the tone he used when explaining things to people he thought were stupid. "You're going to sign over full custody. I'm going to get child support. Well, your daddy's going to pay it. And then I'm done. With you. With this whole mess." Victoria's voice came out as barely a whisper. "My father cut me off 7 years ago." Derek laughed, actually laughed. "I know, that's the beautiful part. You burned that bridge to prove you didn't need him. Stubborn Victoria, always trying to prove something. Well, guess what? You need him now. But he blocked your number, didn't he? Good luck with that." He turned to Cassidy, held out his hand. "Come on, babe. Let's go." Cassidy stared at him like she had never seen him before. Slowly, deliberately, she took off the ring and threw it at his feet. "Don't ever touch me again," she said, her voice shaking. Then she ran from the chapel. Derek shrugged, bent down to pick up the ring, and pocketed it. He looked at Victoria one more time. "You should have just signed a prenup when I asked 7 years ago. This could have been so much easier." Then he walked out, leaving Victoria sitting in her wheelchair in the middle of the chapel, surrounded by strangers who didn't know where to look. Lauren knelt beside her. "Tori, honey, we need to get you back to your room." "I have nothing," Victoria said. The words felt surreal, like they were coming from someone else's mouth. "No home, no money, 3 babies in the NICU, and I can't even hold them because my body—" Her monitor started beeping, the medical alarm that meant her blood pressure was spiking dangerously. "We need to go. Now." Lauren started pushing the wheelchair quickly toward the door. As they left, Victoria caught sight of herself in the reflection of the chapel's glass doors. Hospital gown, pale face, bruises from IV needles. Completely alone. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. 7 years ago, she'd married Derek Morrison to prove to her controlling father that she could make her own choices, that she didn't need Richard Hastings' money or his approval, that she could build a life on her own terms. And now look at her. She'd proven her father right about everything. The hospital room felt smaller at night. Victoria lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling tiles she'd counted earlier. 42 of them. She kept counting them over and over because it was better than thinking about the wreckage of her life. 11 o'clock. The nurse had checked her vitals 20 minutes ago, adjusted her pain medication, and reminded her that she needed a rest, as if rest was possible when your entire world had imploded. Lauren appeared in the doorway, still in her scrubs from the end of her shift. She carried a laptop under one arm and determination in her eyes. "Okay," Lauren said, pulling a chair up beside the bed. "I called my cousin Jennifer. She's a family lawyer. She said she'll take your case pro bono." "Pro bono?" And Victoria's voice was flat. "Because I'm a charity case now." "No, because Derek Morrison is a piece of garbage, and she wants to destroy him." Victoria almost smiled at that. Almost. "I don't know if there's anything to destroy him with. He planned this, Lauren, all of it. He stopped paying rent months ago. He drained our joint account. He filed custody papers before the babies were even born. He's been 10 steps ahead this whole time. Then we get 20 steps ahead." Lauren opened the laptop. "Jennifer's going to come by tomorrow morning. She said to write down everything, every detail, every red flag you ignored, every lie you can remember. We build a timeline. Victoria closed her eyes. Red flags. There had been so many, hadn't there? The late nights that became more frequent. The way he'd encouraged her to quit her job at the investment bank, said it was too stressful for the pregnancy. The way he'd slowly isolated her from friends, from her father, from anyone who might have seen through him. I was so stupid, she whispered. You were trusting. There's a difference. Victoria's phone, which Lauren had plugged into charge, suddenly rang. Unknown number. Victoria almost didn't answer, but Lauren nodded at her to pick up. Hello? Victoria? A woman's voice, thick with tears. This is Cassidy Blake from the chapel. Victoria's first instinct was to hang up, but something in Cassidy's voice stopped her. The other woman sounded as destroyed as Victoria felt. I'm so sorry, Cassidy said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know. He showed me divorce papers, court documents. Everything looked real. He said you'd been separated for 2 years and the divorce was almost final. He said you were the one dragging it out. How long? Victoria asked. 8 months. We met at a teacher conference. He said he did corporate training for schools. He was charming and funny and paid attention to me in a way no one had in years. He said his ex-wife, that you were obsessive, that you wouldn't let him move on. Victoria laughed, but it sounded broken even to her own ears. He told me he was working late, building his business. He told me you were the reason he was stressed, that dealing with you was exhausting. A long silence stretched between them. Two women who'd been played by the same man, who'd believed the same lies, who'd both lost something precious to Derek Morrison's manipulation. I have recordings, Cassidy said finally, of him. I recorded conversations on my phone because sometimes the way he talked scared me. The way he discussed manipulating people, gaming the system. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I recorded things just in case you ever came after me and I needed proof I didn't know. Victoria sat up straighter despite the pain. What kind of recordings? Him talking about his plans, about using the babies for child support, about manipulating your father for money, about disappearing to Monaco once he got what he wanted. I have 8 months of conversations, Victoria, 8 months of him planning this. Lauren was gesturing frantically, mouthing the words, get the recordings. Why are you telling me this? Victoria asked. Cassidy's voice cracked. Because we're both his victims. Because those babies deserve better than a father who sees them as meal tickets. And because I'm a teacher, I've spent my whole career protecting kids. I won't let him use them. Send me everything you have. I'll email it to you tonight. And Victoria, I'm sorry for all of it. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I never would have if I'd known. I believe you, Victoria said, surprised to find it was true. Cassidy Blake was as much a victim of Derek's con as she was. Maybe more, in some ways. At least Victoria had gotten 7 years to see glimpses of who Derek really was. Cassidy had been living in a complete fantasy. After Cassidy hung up, Lauren looked at Victoria with something like hope in her eyes. Recordings are evidence. Real, usable evidence. Against expensive lawyers, Victoria gestured to the custody papers Derek had left with her. Blackstone and Associates, the kind of firm that billed $1,000 an hour. How am I supposed to fight that? I have no money, Lauren. He took everything. Then we figure it out. I know what you were going to say. Call my father. Ask Richard Hastings to swoop in and save me. Prove that I couldn't make it on my own after all. Victoria shook her head. I spent 7 years trying to prove I didn't need him. I told him I never wanted his help. And now I'm supposed to what? Call him up and beg? Lauren was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Let me ask you something. What matters more, your pride or your children? The question hung in the air. Victoria knew the answer. She'd known it the moment the question was asked. But knowing the answer and accepting it were two different things. He blocked my number 7 years ago, Victoria said. After our last fight, after I told him I never wanted to see him again. People change. Situations change. And you're his daughter, Tori. His only daughter. Victoria looked down at her hands, at the IV still taped to her wrist, at the hospital bracelet with her name and the date and time her life had fallen apart. I don't even know if I could reach him if I tried. Richard Hastings doesn't exactly take calls from people he's cut off. Try anyway. What do you have to lose that you haven't already lost? Everything, Victoria thought. The last shred of dignity, the last piece of pride, the last remnant of the girl who'd walked away from her father's mansion 7 years ago. Head held high, determined to make it on her own. But Lauren was right. None of that mattered anymore. Not compared to Lily and Emma and Jack, three tiny humans fighting to breathe in the NICU down the hall. Three babies who deserved better than a mother too proud to ask for help. Okay, Victoria whispered. Okay, tomorrow. I'll try to reach him tomorrow. But tomorrow would bring its own disasters. Tomorrow, Derek Morrison would prove just how thoroughly he'd planned Victoria's destruction. And tomorrow, Victoria would learn that rock bottom had a basement. The next 3 days passed in a blur of pain medication, pumping breast milk for babies she still hadn't been strong enough to hold, and reviewing evidence with Jennifer Wade. Lauren's cousin turned out to be exactly what Victoria needed: sharp, pragmatic, and absolutely furious on Victoria's behalf. Jennifer was 38, wore her black hair in a no-nonsense bob, and had a reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning them. This is good, Jennifer said, reviewing the financial records Victoria had managed to save on a backup drive before the apartment foreclosure. Really good. He transferred $287,000 from your joint account over 8 months. That's financial abuse, and we can prove it. They sat in Victoria's hospital room, papers and laptops spread across the bed. Victoria was finally sitting up without feeling like she might pass out, but her body still ached in ways she'd never imagined possible. The recordings from Cassidy are even better, Jennifer continued, plugging in headphones. Let me play you the most damning one. Derek's voice filled Victoria's ears through the headphones. She recognized the tone, the one he used when he thought he was being clever. The triplets are perfect, 3 times the child support. I'll bleed her father dry. The old man's got billions. He'll pay anything to protect his daughter's reputation. Cassidy's voice, uncertain. But I thought you said her father cut her off. Derek laughing. He did. But you think Richard Hastings is going to let his grandchildren grow up in poverty? He'll cave. And when he does, I'm thinking 10 million minimum. Then I dump the brats with the nanny, take the money, and disappear to Monaco. Victoria will be too broken to fight back. I've made sure of that. Victoria felt sick. Jennifer took the headphones back. He's describing fraud and conspiracy, on tape, with a witness who's willing to testify. But he's hired Blackstone and Associates, Victoria said. I've looked them up. They're one of the top family law firms in the country. They eat legal aid lawyers for breakfast. Jennifer's jaw tightened. Then I guess I'd better bring my appetite. A knock on the door interrupted them. Lauren poked her head and, Tori, there's someone from your father's office here. Says they have a message for you. Victoria's heart leaped. He responded? My father actually... No, the secretary said, stepping into the room. She wore an expensive suit and carried an even more expensive briefcase. I'm Mr. Hastings' executive assistant. I was instructed to deliver this message personally. She handed Victoria an envelope, heavy cream stationery with Richard Hastings' embossed logo in the corner. Victoria's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single sentence in her father's harsh handwriting. You made your choice 7 years ago. Live with it. The secretary cleared her throat. Mr. Hastings also wanted me to inform you that his number remains blocked and any future attempts to contact him will be forwarded directly to security. Then she left. Victoria stared at the note. 7 words that confirmed what she'd feared. Richard Hastings hadn't forgiven her for marrying Derek, hadn't forgiven her for choosing a charming con artist over her father's warnings, and he wasn't going to help her now. Okay, Jennifer said after a long moment. Okay, we don't need him. We can do this on our own. How? Victoria asked. How do we fight Blackstone and Associates with no money? We have evidence. We have the recordings. We have a forensic accountant I know who will work pro bono to trace where Derek's hidden money. We have Cassidy willing to testify. It's not about money, Victoria. It's about truth. Victoria wanted to believe her. She really did. But 7 years of being married to Derek Morrison had taught her that truth was often just another weapon to be manipulated. We have an emergency hearing in 3 days, Jennifer continued. We're asking for temporary custody. The judge will see that Derek abandoned you during a medical emergency, that he proposed to another woman while you were in surgery, that he's systematically stolen from you. No judge is going to award him custody after that. Derek's been planning this for 8 months, Victoria said quietly. Do you really think he doesn't have a counter move? Jennifer paused. What do you mean? I mean, Derek Morrison doesn't make mistakes. Every move he's made has been calculated. He wants me to fight back. He's expecting it, which means he has something planned that we don't know about yet. The words proved prophetic. The next day, Victoria received discharge papers from the hospital. Dr. Walsh cleared her to leave, though she cautioned Victoria to rest and avoid stress, as if that were possible. Lauren helped try to pack Victoria's few belongings. Everything she owned now fit in a single duffel bag, and they headed to Lauren's apartment. The babies would stay in the NICU for at least another week, maybe 2, until they were strong enough to leave. Victoria spent the evening pumping milk, reviewing evidence with Jennifer, and trying not to think about how her life had become this unrecognizable thing. At midnight, exhausted and aching, she finally fell asleep on Lauren's couch. At 7 the next morning, her phone rang. Unknown number again. Victoria almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Is this Victoria Hastings? Yes. This is Detective Sarah Mitchell with the city police. I need you to come down to the station. We have some questions about threatening messages sent from your phone number. Victoria's blood went cold. What threatening messages? I haven't sent anyone anything. Ma'am, we have screenshots. Messages sent to Derek Morrison and Cassidy Blake threatening violence. Messages sent to Mr. Morrison's workplace. We need you to come in and answer some questions. This is insane. I didn't send any messages. Derek has access to my accounts. He could have sent them himself. Ma'am, please just come to the station. I'm calling my lawyer, Victoria said and hung up. Jennifer arrived at Lauren's apartment within an hour. Don't go to the station yet. Let me figure out what's happening. By noon, they had the answer. Derek had filed for a restraining order, claiming Victoria was harassing him and Cassidy. He'd submitted screenshots of threatening texts, all sent from Victoria's phone number, as evidence. But I didn't send these, Victoria said, staring at her phone in disbelief. The messages were vile, threatening, exactly the kind of thing an unstable ex-wife might send. I know, Jennifer said grimly. But proving that will take time. Time we don't have. The hearing is tomorrow. This is the counter move, Victoria said quietly. This is what he planned. He's painting me as unstable, violent, a threat. And when we go into that hearing tomorrow, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They all knew what Derek was doing. He was manufacturing evidence that Victoria was exactly what he claimed she was, mentally unstable and dangerous. And he'd been careful enough that proving otherwise would take weeks they didn't have. The hearing was in 18 hours, and Derek Morrison was winning. Victoria barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Derek's face in the chapel, heard his cold laughter, felt the weight of what he'd done pressing down on her chest until she couldn't breathe. At 6 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep and pumped milk for the babies. The routine was meditative: connect the pump, watch the bottles fill, disconnect, label them with the date and time. Lily, Emma, Jack. She'd only been able to hold them once each since they were born. The NICU nurses said they were doing well, growing stronger. But Victoria felt like she was missing everything. Ready for this? Lauren asked, appearing in the doorway with coffee and a determined expression. No, Victoria said honestly, but I don't have a choice. Jennifer had laid out the strategy last night. They'd present the financial evidence, the recordings from Cassidy, proof that Derek had abandoned Victoria during a medical emergency. They'd argue that the threatening messages were fabricated, that Derek had access to Victoria's accounts and could have sent them himself. It wasn't a perfect defense, but it was all they had. At 8 in the morning, Victoria's phone rang. Her mother's number, or what used to be her mother's number. Catherine Hastings had died 5 years ago, and Richard had kept the line active. Victoria had no idea why he was calling from that number now. She answered, Victoria, her father's voice, exactly as she remembered it. Deep, commanding, impossible to ignore. I received word that you're facing a custody hearing today. How did you, I'm a billionaire, Victoria. I receive word about everything that concerns my family, even family members who claim they don't want anything to do with me. Victoria's throat tightened. If you're calling to say I told you so, I'm calling to offer assistance. I can have a legal team there in 2 hours. I don't want your help, Victoria said, the old anger and pride rising up. I don't want to prove you right about Derek. I don't want to admit that I should have listened to you 7 years ago. And I don't want to watch my daughter lose custody of my grandchildren because she's too stubborn to accept help. That's not fair. None of this is fair. But pride is a luxury you can't afford right now. Let me help you. Victoria wanted to say yes. God, she wanted to say yes so badly. But something held her back. The same something that had made her walk out of Richard Hastings' mansion 7 years ago, determined to prove she could make it on her own. I need to do this myself, she said quietly. I need to prove. What? That you can clean up Derek Morrison's mess without help? That you're independent and strong? Victoria, no one wins custody battles alone. The question isn't whether you need help, it's whether you're brave enough to accept it. But Victoria was already shaking her head, even though her father couldn't see her. I'll figure it out. I have a lawyer. We have evidence. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. Richard Hastings sighed, a sound heavy with disappointment in something that might have been fear. When you're ready to stop being stubborn and start being strategic, call me. The number is the same. He hung up. Victoria stared at her phone, her father's words echoing in her head. When you're ready to stop being stubborn and start being strategic. That was your dad? Lauren asked. Victoria nodded. And you told him no. I told him I need to do this myself. Lauren studied her for a long moment. Sometimes I wonder if you and Derek are more alike than you think. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're both willing to destroy your lives to prove a point. His point was that he could con his way to wealth. Your point is that you don't need your father. But pride isn't a virtue when it costs you your children, Tori. The words stung because they were true, but Victoria couldn't make herself pick up the phone and call Richard back. Not yet. Maybe after the hearing, maybe after she'd tried it her way first. The hearing was scheduled for 1 p.m. Victoria had 3 hours to prepare. At 10:30, she decided to retrieve one final thing from the old apartment, her mother's jewelry, the only item of real value she had left. Derek hadn't known about it because Victoria kept it in a safety deposit box her mother had set up before she died. The key had survived the foreclosure because Victoria kept it on a chain around her neck. I'll go with you, Lauren offered. No, stay here. Rest. You've done enough already. That was Victoria's first mistake, going alone. The bank was familiar, unchanged. She retrieved the small velvet bag from the safety deposit box, her mother's pearls, her grandmother's rings, things Derek couldn't touch because he'd never known they existed. Victoria clutched the bag to her chest and headed to the old apartment building to grab just one more thing, her mother's photo album. The building superintendent had been kind, had saved some personal items when everything was put on the street. He'd said he'd hold them for a week in the basement storage room. Victoria approached the building with the jewelry bag in her purse and hope fluttering in her chest. Maybe she could at least salvage these memories. Maybe. Derek was there, standing in the lobby with 2 police officers. That's her, Derek said, pointing. The woman I told you about. Ma'am, one of the officers said, approaching Victoria, we have a restraining order that says you're not permitted within 500 feet of Derek Morrison. What? That's impossible. I never received notice of any restraining order. It was filed yesterday. Emergency protective order. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. This is insane. Victoria looked at Derek, saw the small smile playing at his lips. I'm here to get my mother's photo album. I'm not here for him. Derek pulled out his phone, showing it to the officers. I have screenshots here of threatening texts she's sent me. Messages where she says she's going to kill me and my fiancé. Look at the timestamps. Some of these are from this morning. Victoria looked at the phone screen, her number, her name. Threats she'd never written. Those aren't from me. He has access to my accounts. He's faking these. Ma'am, you can explain all of this at the station. Turn around, please. No, you don't understand. I have a custody hearing in 2 hours. I need to be there. Then you should have thought of that before stalking Mr. Morrison. Lauren had warned her to bring someone. Jennifer had said not to go anywhere near Derek before the hearing. But Victoria had been so certain she could handle one simple errand. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. And that's when the news van pulled up. Derek had tipped them off. Of course he had. He'd planned every detail, the timing, the location, the cameras. Mr. Morrison, a reporter called out, jogging toward them with a cameraman in tow. Is it true the mother of your triplets has been stalking you? Derek's face transformed into a mask of concerned sadness. I just want what's best for my children. Their mother is clearly going through something, and I hope she gets the help she needs. Victoria was led toward the police car, cameras flashing, her face broadcast for the world to see. Derek Morrison's crazy ex-wife, the unstable mother, the woman who couldn't be trusted with her own children. She thought she'd hit rock bottom in the chapel, but rock bottom, it turned out, had a basement. The holding cell smelled like industrial cleaner and despair. Victoria sat on the metal bench, her body still aching from childbirth, her mind racing through everything that had just happened. Derek had orchestrated this. All of it. The fake threatening messages, the emergency restraining order, the tip to the news media. He'd manufactured a public arrest 2 hours before their custody hearing to ensure she'd look exactly how he wanted her to look. Unstable, violent, unfit. And she'd walked right into it. A guard appeared at the cell door. Hastings, your lawyer's here. Jennifer Wade looked like she'd aged 10 years in the last 3 hours. She sat across from Victoria in a small interview room, and her expression was grim. I got your bail hearing moved up. You'll be out by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, the custody hearing was today. The hearing was postponed, and Tori, there's something else. Jennifer paused, and Victoria saw fear in her lawyer's eyes. CPS showed up at Lauren's apartment an hour ago, anonymous tip that the babies were being kept in an unsafe environment. Victoria stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. No, 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 the babies are in the NICU. They're not even at Lauren's apartment yet. I know, but CPS has protocols. They investigated and determined that the living situation was unsuitable for 3 infants. The babies have been placed in emergency foster care. The room tilted. Victoria grabbed the edge of the table to keep from falling. My babies are with strangers? Temporary foster care. Just until the hearing, which has been rescheduled for tomorrow at 9. Tori, I need you to listen to me. Derek's team has filed new evidence. Fake psychiatric evaluations showing a history of mental instability. Pharmacy records for medications you never took. They've built a complete case that you're unfit. But none of it's real. I know that. You know that. But proving it will take time we don't have. And I'm one person going up against Blackstone and Associates. They have resources I can't match. Victoria sank back into the chair. Her babies were with strangers. She was in jail. Derek had manufactured an entire false reality, and the legal system was believing it because he had expensive lawyers and she had nothing. There is one option, Jennifer said quietly. Your father. He called this morning. I said no. Then you need to call him back. Tori, I'm good, but I can't win this alone. Not against what Derek's built. You need a legal team. You need forensic experts. You need a people who can fight on Derek's level. Victoria thought about pride, about independence, about the girl who'd walked away from her father 7 years ago, determined to make it on her own. Then she thought about Lily, Emma, and Jack, 3 tiny humans in foster care instead of in her arms where they belonged. Do you have your phone? Victoria asked. Jennifer handed it over. Victoria had memorized the number 16 years ago when she was 16, and her father had given her a phone for emergencies only. She'd never deleted it, even after he'd blocked her. Maybe some part of her had always known she'd need it someday. The phone rang once, twice. Who is this? Deep voice, wary and commanding. Dad? Victoria's voice broke on the word. It's me. Silence. Then, Victoria? I'm in county jail, downtown. Derek has the babies in foster care. There's a hearing tomorrow at 9, and I'm going to lose them. I need... Her voice cracked. She couldn't say the words. Couldn't admit defeat. Where are you? Not I told you so, not this is your fault. Just where are you? County jail, downtown. Dad, I need... Don't say another word. Not to anyone. Do you understand me? I'm in Houston. I'll be there in 3 hours. Not another word. The babies. I know about the babies. I've always known about the babies, Victoria. 3 hours. Hold on. The line went dead. Victoria handed the phone back to Jennifer, tears streaming down her face. He's coming. Thank God, Jennifer said. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the guard appeared again. Hastings, you've got another visitor. Derek Morrison walked into the interview room with a smile that made Victoria's blood run cold. Thought you'd want to know, he said conversationally. My lawyers cut me a deal. If you sign over full custody right now and agree to a $5 million settlement paid by your father, all charges disappear. You get out of jail. You get to see your kids on a supervised visits. Everybody wins. He slid papers across the table. Full custody agreement, $5 million. Oh, wait, Derek said, snapping at his fingers like he just remembered something. Your dad blocked you, didn't he? Guess you can't ask him for $5 million. Shame. Hearings at 9 tomorrow morning. Sign or lose your kids forever. Your choice. He walked out whistling. Victoria stared at the papers. 3 hours until her father arrived. 6 hours until the hearing that would determine whether she ever got her children back. She'd spent 7 years trying to prove she didn't need Richard Hastings. And now she'd lost everything because of that stubborn pride. Lauren had been right. Sometimes refusing help wasn't strength. It was just another form of destruction. At 11 that night, still alone in the holding cell, Victoria finally understood what Derek had been counting on. He'd been betting that her pride would keep her from calling her father until it was too late. He'd been betting that Victoria would rather lose her children than admit she'd been wrong. He'd almost won that bet. But Richard Hastings was on his way. And Derek Morrison, for all his planning and manipulation, had made one critical miscalculation. He'd underestimated what a billionaire father would do when you threatened his grandchildren. At 2:47 in the morning, the quiet of the county jail shattered with the sound of raised voices and heavy footsteps. Sir, you can't just move aside. Victoria heard her father's voice before she saw him. That tone that brooked no argument. The voice that had built an empire and crushed anyone who stood in his way. Richard Hastings appeared in front of her cell like an avenging angel in a $3,000 suit. Behind him stood her brother Marcus, looking grimmer than Victoria had ever seen him. Behind Marcus came an army, 3 lawyers in matching Navy suits, a man carrying 2 boxes of files, and a woman with a briefcase that probably cost more than Victoria's old apartment. My daughter, Richard said to the guard. Now. 5 minutes later, Victoria was released into a private conference room. The guard had mentioned something about protocols and processing, but one phone call from Richard's lead attorney had cleared it all away. Victoria and her father stared at each other across a battered metal table. 7 years since they'd been in the same room. 7 years since she'd told him she never wanted to see him again. He looked older, silver hair where there had been dark brown, new lines around his eyes, but the same commanding presence, the same intensity that had always made Victoria feel both protected and suffocated. You came, Victoria said. Her voice sounded small in the cold room. Did you think I wouldn't? You blocked my number. You sent your assistant with a note telling me to live within my choices. Richard's jaw tightened. I blocked your old number. The one you used to tell me you never wanted my help again. But this one, he held up his phone. This one I've kept on me every single day for 7 years, waiting for you to realize that no matter how angry we were at each other, you are still my daughter. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I was wrong. About everything. About Derek. About thinking I could do this alone. About we'll have time for apologies later. Right now we have 6 hours to save your children. Richard turned to his team. This is James Reagan, my corporate attorney. Sarah Williams, family law specialist. David Brooks, forensic accountant. And Marcus, you remember. Marcus moved around the table and pulled Victoria into a hug. Hey, sis, let's get you out of this mess. Marcus, Richard said sharply, we don't have time. Sarah Williams, a woman in her 40s with steel gray eyes and an air of complete competence, opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We have 6 hours until your hearing. Here's what we know about Derek Morrison. She slid a photo across the table. Derek's face, but with a different name beneath it. Derek Morrison isn't his real name. He's Derek Sutton. Changed it legally 5 years ago after fraud charges in Delaware. Victoria stared at the photo. What? He's done this before, the private investigator added, opening one of his boxes. Twice. Different cities, different names, same pattern. More photos appeared on the table. Two women, both around Victoria's age. Emma Rodriguez, Seattle, 2019. He married her, drained her accounts of $400,000, filed for divorce claiming she was mentally unstable. She attempted suicide 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Katie Williams, Boston, 2021. Same pattern. Married her, isolated her from family, stole $300,000, then claimed she was dangerous and unfit. She's currently in psychiatric care. Victoria's hands shook as she looked at the photos. Two other women, two other victims, and Derek had used the exact same playbook. The beautiful part, James Reagan said, his voice cold with satisfaction, is that he used identical tactics. Same fake psychiatric claims, same manufactured evidence of instability, same restraining order tricks. It's a pattern, and patterns make him vulnerable in court. Both women have agreed to testify, Sarah added. They've been waiting years for a chance to expose him. Richard leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. Why didn't you call me sooner? Victoria met her father's eyes. Because 7 years ago, I told you I didn't need you, that I'd never need your money or your help. I was so determined to prove I could make it on my own. Pride, Richard said quietly. You got that from me. I'm sorry for everything. For choosing Derek to spite you. You didn't choose him to spite me. You chose him because you were 25 and he was charming, and I was a controlling tyrant trying to force you into a business arrangement marriage. We were both wrong, Victoria, but we don't have time to unpack 7 years of mistakes right now. We have children to save. Marcus pulled out his phone. I've got confirmation from the hospital. The babies are stable. They'll be released from NICU to our custody as soon as we win this hearing. When we win, Richard corrected. Not if, when. David Brooks, the forensic accountant, spread more papers across the table. Derek Morrison, or Sutton, has been very careful. But careful people make patterns. He transferred money to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Used shell companies to hide assets. But every shell company has a paper trail if you know where to look. We've traced $287,000 he stole from your joint account, Sarah said. $143,000 spent on jewelry for Cassidy Blake, $89,000 to offshore accounts, $55,000 to an LLC that doesn't exist. Every transaction documented and ready to present in court. Victoria looked around at the team her father had assembled in 3 hours. People who'd probably been pulled from sleep, who'd flown across state lines, who'd compiled a case that would take normal lawyers weeks to build. How did you do all this in 3 hours? Richard's expression was grim. I've been having Derek investigated since the day you married him. What? You're my daughter. Did you think I just let you disappear with a man I didn't trust? I've had investigators watching him for 7 years, documenting everything. I knew about the affairs, the financial theft, the name change. I knew he was a con artist from day one. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was trying to control you, trying to break up your marriage to prove I was right. So I waited and watched and gathered evidence in case you ever needed it. Victoria didn't know whether to be furious or grateful. Her father had been spying on her for 7 years, but that spying had also just saved her children. The hearing is at 9, Sarah said, pulling the conversation back to business. Derek's team will present their case first. They'll paint you as unstable, violent, unfit. We let them talk. Then we destroy everything they've built. How, James Reagan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. By exposing Derek Sutton for exactly what he is, a serial con artist who's been doing this for a decade. And by presenting evidence so overwhelming that even Blackstone and Associates can't spin it. But what about the custody agreement Derek wanted me to sign, the $5 million settlement? Richard's eyes went cold. Let him try to collect. I'll bury him in litigation for the next 20 years. They spent the next 4 hours preparing, Sarah walked Victoria through her testimony. James reviewed the legal strategy. David explained the financial evidence. Marcus sat beside Victoria, a solid presence, occasionally squeezing her shoulder when the stress became too much. At 7 in the morning, Sarah's phone buzzed. She read the message and smiled. Cassidy Blake just confirmed she'll be testifying. She's bringing her recordings. Will the judge allow them? Victoria asked. It's a one-party consent state. She was party to every conversation. The recordings are completely legal. By 8:30, they were ready. Victoria had been released from jail. The charges quietly dropped after a phone call from Richard's lawyers. They headed to family court in a convoy of black SUVs that screamed, "We have money and we're not afraid to use it." Derek was already there with his legal team. He saw Richard Hastings and his entire face changed. The smug confidence drained away, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "This is harassment," Derek said to his lawyers. "This is family," Richard responded coldly. "Something you'll never understand." The courtroom filled. Victoria, Richard, Marcus, and their legal team on one side, Derek and Blackstone and associates on the other, and in the back, partially hidden, Cassidy Blake, carrying a phone with 8 months of recordings that would expose Derek Sutton for exactly what he was. The judge entered, an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Let's begin," she said, and Derek Morrison's carefully constructed web of lies began to unravel. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Derek, which was a small mercy, surveyed the courtroom with the expression of someone who'd seen every variety of human ugliness and wasn't impressed by any of it. "This is an emergency custody hearing regarding 3 minor children born 8 days ago," she began. "Mr. Morrison, your petition claims the mother is mentally unstable and poses a danger to the children. Let's hear your evidence." Derek's lead attorney from Blackstone and Associates stood. Gregory Stone, a man who'd made millions defending the indefensible. He laid out Derek's case with the smooth confidence of someone who'd never lost. Victoria was mentally unstable. Evidence: threatening text messages sent from her phone. A restraining order filed due to her violent behavior. Witnesses who'd seen her attack Derek in a hospital chapel while in a clearly deranged state. She was homeless. No stable living situation for 3 newborns. She had no income. Derek, meanwhile, had a successful business and could provide for the children. She'd attempted to harass and intimidate Derek's fiancée, calling her workplace, making false accusations. The fake psychiatric evaluations came next. Documents that looked official, claiming Victoria had been treated for depression and anxiety, that she'd been prescribed medications she had stopped taking. All of it manufactured, but Gregory Stone presented it like gospel truth. "This woman," Stone concluded, "is clearly suffering from postpartum psychosis. She poses a danger to herself and these children. My client is requesting full custody with supervised visitation only." Derek sat at his table, playing the concerned father perfectly. He'd even worn a wedding ring, probably the same one he'd tried to give Cassidy. Judge Morrison looked at Victoria. "Miss Hastings, do you have representation?" Sarah Williams stood. "Your Honor, I'm Sarah Williams from the firm of Williams and Associates. I'll be representing Miss Hastings along with James Reagan." Gregory Stone's eyebrows rose slightly. Williams and Associates was one of the few firms that could go toe-to-toe with Blackstone. This wasn't going to be the easy win he'd expected. "Your Honor," Sarah began, "my client has evidence that changes the entire nature of this case. But first, I'd like to cross-examine Mr. Morrison." "Proceed." Derek took the stand, still playing the concerned father. Sarah approached him like a lioness approaching prey. "Mr. Morrison, you filed a restraining order claiming my client sent you threatening messages. Is that correct?" "Yes, she's been harassing me and my fiancé." "These messages were sent from Miss Hastings' phone number?" "Yes." "And you claim she sent them herself?" "Who else would have sent them?" Sarah pulled out a thick file. According to records from the cell phone provider, these messages were sent from a device with a different IMEI number than Miss Hastings' phone. They were sent from a cloned device, a device that only someone with access to Miss Hastings' account information could create. She handed documents to the judge. "Phone records, Your Honor. The threatening messages came from a cloned phone. Mr. Morrison had full access to Miss Hastings's phone account. He could have easily created a clone and sent these messages himself. Derek's lawyer objected, but the evidence was clear. Gregory Stone looked less confident now. Let's talk about the restraining order, Sarah continued. You filed it claiming Miss Hastings showed up at your workplace multiple times. But Miss Hastings was in the hospital for 72 hours post-surgery, then staying at 427 Oak Street, her friend's apartment. Here are hospital logs, building security footage, timestamps. She was never within 5 miles of your workplace. More documents, more evidence. Derek's face was starting to show cracks. The restraining order was filed using a forged signature, Sarah said. We had it analyzed by 3 separate handwriting experts. Miss Hastings never signed this document. Someone else did. Someone who wanted to make her look dangerous. Judge Morrison was leaning forward now, studying the evidence with sharp eyes. Let's move on to something more interesting, Sarah said. Your name, or should I say, your names. She pulled out more files. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Derek Morrison is not this man's legal name. He was born Derek Sutton. He changed his name 5 years ago, shortly after fraud charges were filed against him in Delaware. Derek's face went pale. Gregory Stone was flipping through papers frantically. Objection, Stone called. This is character assassination. This is a pattern, Sarah interrupted. And patterns are relevant in family court. I'll allow it, Judge Morrison said. Sarah turned back to Derek. Mr. Sutton, you have been married before, haven't you? That's not relevant. Answer the question. I was married. It ended badly. It ended with your wife attempting suicide after you stole $400,000 from her and claimed she was mentally unstable. Isn't that right? The courtroom erupted. Gregory Stone was objecting loudly, but Sarah just kept going. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness, Emma Rodriguez. A woman in her 30s entered the courtroom. She looked at Derek with an expression of pure hatred. Miss Rodriguez, Sarah said gently, can you tell the court about your marriage to Derek Sutton? Emma's testimony was devastating. The same pattern, the same lies, the same tactics Derek had used on Victoria. Right down to the fake psychiatric evaluations and the manufactured evidence. And after the divorce, Sarah asked? I tried to kill myself, Emma said quietly, because I thought I was crazy, because he'd convinced everyone I was the problem. It took 3 years of therapy to understand that I was abused. Thank you for your courage in testifying today. Sarah turned to the judge. Your Honor, there's another witness in this. Katie Williams, would you like to hear her testimony as well, or should I submit it in writing? Submit it in writing, Judge Morrison said. Her face was stone, but her eyes were angry. Mr. Sutton, or Morrison, I think I've heard enough about your history. David Brooks, the forensic accountant, was called next. He presented the financial evidence methodically. $287,000 stolen, shell companies, offshore accounts, every dollar traced and documented. This isn't a man asking for custody because he cares about his children, David concluded. This is a con artist trying to access his victim's family money through child support. Then it was Cassidy Blake's turn. She walked to the witness stand looking terrified but determined. Miss Blake, Sarah said, you were engaged to Mr. Morrison? I thought I was. He told me he was divorced, showed me fake papers, made me believe his ex-wife was the problem. You recorded some of your conversations with him? Yes, he said things that scared me. I recorded them in case I needed to protect myself. Would you play recording 47 for the court? Cassidy's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and connected it to the courtroom's sound system. Derek's voice filled the space. Confident, cruel, planning Victoria's destruction in detail. The triplets are perfect. 3 times the child support. I'll bleed her father dry. The old man's got billions. He'll pay anything to protect his daughter's reputation. I'm thinking 10 million minimum settlement. Then I dump the brats with a nanny, take the money, and disappear to Monaco. Victoria will be too broken to fight back. I've made sure of that. The courtroom was silent. Even Gregory Stone looked sick. Derek stood up. That's illegal. She can't. Sit down, Mr. Sutton, Judge Morrison said coldly. One more outburst, and you'll be held in contempt. Derek sat. His game was over, and he knew it. Does the defense have anything else? The judge asked. Just one more thing, Your Honor, Sarah said. FBI agents are currently waiting outside this courtroom with a warrant for Mr. Sutton's arrest. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines. The United States Attorney's Office has been building a case for 6 months. This hearing simply provided additional evidence. As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened. 2 FBI agents entered. Derek Sutton, you're under arrest. Derek tried to run. He actually tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the agents had him in handcuffs. This isn't legal, he screamed as they dragged him toward the door. You can't do this. Richard, you bought them. You paid them off. Richard Hastings spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet but carried through the courtroom like a death sentence. I bought nothing. I simply made some phone calls to people who appreciate when patterns of fraud are brought to their attention. The law did the rest. Derek was still screaming as they took him away. Judge Morrison took a moment to compose herself. When she spoke, her voice was ice. I've been on this bench for 30 years. I've seen terrible people do terrible things. But this case, this systematic abuse, this predatory behavior is among the worst. She looked at Victoria. Miss Hastings, I'm awarding you full and sole custody of your children. Mr. Sutton will have no visitation rights pending the outcome of his criminal trial. I'm also ordering him to repay every dollar he stole with penalties and interest. She signed the custody order with a sharp stroke of her pen. Your children are waiting for you, Miss Hastings. Go be their mother. Outside the courthouse, Victoria held the custody order in her hands like it might disappear if she let go. The paper felt thin, almost fragile, but it meant everything. Her children were hers, legally, officially, completely. The babies are being released from foster care now, Marcus said, checking his phone. They're at the hospital. We can go get them. But Victoria couldn't move yet. She turned to her father, who stood slightly apart from the group, his usual commanding presence somehow gentler than she remembered. You had him investigated for 7 years. Yes. You knew everything. About the affairs, the stealing, all of it. Yes. Why didn't you tell him? Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw in a way Victoria had never heard before. Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was trying to control you again, trying to break up your marriage to prove I'd been right about Derek from the beginning. So I waited and watched and hoped you'd see through him before it was too late. You should have told me. Probably, but I was afraid of pushing you further away. I'd already lost you once because I tried to force my will on your life. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Victoria looked at her father, really looked at him for the first time in 7 years. He'd aged. The lines around his eyes were deeper. His hair had gone completely silver. And there was something in his expression that Victoria had never seen before. Fear. Her father was afraid, not of Derek or the legal battle. He was afraid of losing her again. I'm sorry, Victoria said, for everything I said 7 years ago. For telling you I never wanted to see you again. For... Stop. Richard held up a hand. I should have been there 7 years ago. Should have tried harder to reach you. Should have been less controlling and more understanding. Your mother would have known what to do. She always knew how to balance support with independence. I never learned that skill. Mom would have said we're both stubborn idiots. She'd be right. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Richard spoke again, his voice uncertain in a way that didn't fit the billionaire oil tycoon. I have a proposal, not a demand. A proposal. The estate has a guest house. It's separate, has its own entrance, its own everything. Move in there with the children. I'll cover medical bills, childcare costs. While you recover, you focus on being their mother, and maybe, he paused, maybe I could get to know my daughter and grandchildren. I can't just accept considerate back payment for 7 years of Misty birthdays. For all the times I should have been there and wasn't. I have a lot to make up for, Victoria. Victoria thought about pride, about independence, about the lessons she'd learned over the past week. Sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness. Sometimes it was the strongest thing you could do. Okay, she said, but I'm paying rent. Richard almost smiled. Stubborn, just like your mother. Wonder where I get that. Marcus cleared his throat. This is very touching, But can we please go get the baby aid now? I'm an uncle and I've barely met them. They went to the hospital in a convoy of black SUVs. The NICU was quiet, peaceful, 3 isolates in a row, each holding a tiny miracle. Victoria approached slowly, hardly daring to believe this was real, that it was over, that Derek was gone and her children were safe. Ready to hold them? The nurse asked with a kind smile by Saul. Yes, Victoria whispered. God, yes. They brought Lily first. 4 pounds, 6 ounces now, bigger than at birth but still impossibly small. Victoria held her daughter against her chest, felt the tiny heartbeat, breathed in that new baby smell. Hi, sweet girl, she whispered. I'm your mom, and I promise you'll never have to fight as hard as you did these first few weeks. I promise you will be safe and loved and protected. Richard stood beside her, looking at his granddaughter with wonder in his eyes. She looks like your mother, he said quietly. Same serious expression. Really? Your mother always looked like she was judging the world and finding it wanting. Even as a baby. His voice caught slightly. She would have loved them, would have spoiled them rotten and taught them to question everything I said. She was good at that. She was good at everything I wasn't. They rotated through all 3 babies. Lily, Emma, Jack. Victoria held each one, memorized their faces, made promises she intended to keep. When all 3 were back in their isolates, Richard pulled Victoria aside. I've set up trust funds, $5 million each. They'll have access when they turn 25. Dad, you don't have to. I do. These children were used as weapons. I'm ensuring they'll never be dependent on anyone the way Derek tried to make you dependent on him. They'll have choices, options, freedom to become whoever they want to be. Victoria didn't argue. Some battles weren't worth fighting. They left the hospital together. A family again, imperfect and scarred, but whole in a way they hadn't been for 7 years. At the estate, the guest house was exactly as Richard had described. Separate entrance, living room, kitchen, 3 bedrooms, space for Victoria to breathe, to heal, to be independent while still having support. The main house is always open, Richard said, standing in the doorway. Sunday dinners, if you want them. No business talk. That's my one rule. I can do Sunday dinners. And Victoria, I know you'll want to get back to work eventually. When you're ready, there's a position at Hastings Industries, VP of Operations. But, he held up a hand, if you'd rather work somewhere else, I'll support that too. This isn't about control, it's about giving you options. I'll think about it. After Richard left, Victoria stood in the middle of her new living room and let herself feel everything. The relief, the exhaustion, the lingering trauma of the past week, the gratitude for her father's unexpected grace. Her phone buzzed, a text from Cassidy. I'm so glad your babies are safe. I'm starting therapy next week. Thank you for seeing me as a victim too, instead of an enemy. I hope you and your family find peace, right, Victim? Victoria typed back. Thank you for your courage in testifying. You saved us. I hope you find peace too. 2 women, both destroyed by the same man, both rebuilding their lives from the ashes. That night, Victoria lay in bed in the guest house and thought about strength, real strength. Not the performance of independence she'd been maintaining for 7 years, but the actual strength of knowing when to ask for help. When to admit you can't do everything alone, when to let people in. Derek had almost destroyed her, but he hadn't, because it turned out she was stronger than he'd thought, stronger than she'd thought. And when you were strong enough to be vulnerable, that's when you really won. 1 year later, the guest house patio was decorated with balloons and soft pastels. 3 high chairs sat in a row, each with a small birthday cake in front of it. 3 one-year-olds covered in frosting and joy. Victoria stood back and watched her children demolish their cakes with the single-minded determination of tiny humans discovering sugar for the first time. Lily was methodical, carefully picking pieces of cake and examining them before eating. Emma was enthusiastic, face completely covered in blue frosting. Jack was suspicious, poking his cake like it might bite back. Your mother would have loved this chaos, Richard said, holding a very sticky Jack. She'd have said we were all too serious. She'd have been right. The party was small, just family and the people who mattered. Lauren was there with Marcus, the 2 of them clearly a couple now, though neither would officially admit it. Cassidy had sent a gift and a note, but declined the invitation, saying she wasn't quite ready yet. Victoria understood. Jennifer Wade and Sarah Williams had come, bringing expensive baby gifts and war stories from other cases they'd won. David Brooks had sent a card with a check for a college fund. Even Dr. Walsh had stopped by earlier with stuffed animals for the triplets. "I still can't believe you invited me," Cassidy had written in her card. "But thank you for seeing me as a person instead of just a mistake. I hope your family finds all the happiness you deserve." Victoria had framed the card, not because she'd forgiven Cassidy, forgiveness was complicated, but because it represented something important, the understanding that Derek's victims weren't enemies of each other. They were survivors of the same con artist. "How does it feel?" Lauren asked, appearing at Victoria's elbow with a glass of wine. "1 year later, mother of triplets, living on your family estate, back at work. Everything you said you didn't want 7 years ago." Victoria thought about it. "Different. I'm not here because I need my father to save me. I'm here because I chose to accept help. That's not the same thing." "You sound very zen." "I sound very tired," Victoria corrected with a laugh. "Triplets don't sleep. Did you know that? They take turns being awake. It's a conspiracy." Lauren laughed. "Marcus warned me, said I should think twice before getting serious with him because the minute we're married, you'll expect us to babysit." "Damn right I will." Richard appeared, having handed Jack off to Marcus. He held a glass of whiskey and had the slightly shell-shocked expression of a man who just spent an hour with 3 sugar-high babies. "I don't know how you do this every day," he said. "Practice and a lot of coffee. Your mother and I only had 2 children, and I thought we'd never survive. 3 at once?" He shook his head. "You're stronger than both of us." "I learned from the best." They stood together, watching the chaos. 3 babies, one devoted uncle trying to prevent Emma from eating another handful of cake, one best friend laughing at Marcus's attempts at baby wrangling, one father who'd learned that love sometimes meant letting go and trusting your children to make their own choices. "Have you heard anything about Derek's trial?" Richard asked quietly. "It starts next month. Jennifer says with all the evidence and the testimony from Emma and Katie, he'll be lucky to get less than 15 years. "Good." Victoria didn't feel satisfaction at the thought of Derek in prison. She didn't feel anything, actually. Derek Morrison, Derek Sutton, had become a footnote in her life, a cautionary tale, a mistake she'd learned from and moved on. "I start the VP position next week," Victoria said, changing the subject to something more pleasant. "Not at Hastings Industries," Richard noted. There was no accusation in his voice, just statement of fact. "No, at Collins Investment Group, your competitor." "I know, I signed off on their background check of you." Victoria looked at her father in surprise. "You did?" "You're good at what you do, Victoria. They'd be idiots not to hire you. The fact that you are my daughter shouldn't be a liability. And if you're going to compete against me in the business world, well," he smiled, "I raised you to be competitive. I learned from the best." "You keep saying that because it's true." The sun was setting over the estate, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. The party was winding down. Soon Lauren would help clean up. Marcus would probably fall asleep on the couch from baby exhaustion, and Richard would return to the main house. But for now, they stood together. A family that had broken and healed, that had been angry and found forgiveness, that had learned the hard way that strength wasn't about never needing anyone. Lily started fussing. Victoria picked her up automatically, swaying slightly to soothe her. Her daughter settled immediately, tiny hand gripping Victoria's finger. "You're happy," Richard observed. It wasn't a question. "I am," Victoria said, surprised to find it completely true. "Not because of the guest house or the job or any of it, but because I stopped trying to prove something and started actually living." "What were you trying to prove?" "That I didn't need you, that I could make it completely on my own. That independence meant never accepting help from anyone. And now? Now I know that real independence is having options and choosing how to use them. It's having support and accepting it without shame. It's knowing that asking for help when you need it isn't weakness. It's wisdom." Richard was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become. she'd say we both finally figured out what she tried to tell us all along. What's that? That love isn't about control or independence or proving points. It's about showing up for the people you care about, even when it's hard, even when it means admitting you were wrong. Victoria looked at her three babies, at her brother, at her best friend, at her father who'd learned to let go while still being present. 1 year ago, she'd been in a hospital room, bleeding out, discovering her husband's betrayal, hitting what she thought was rock bottom. Now she stood in the golden evening light, holding her daughter, surrounded by people who loved her, not despite her mistakes, but because they understood that mistakes were part of being human. Derek had tried to destroy her by taking everything away, but in losing everything, she'd found something more valuable. She'd found out who she really was when all the pretense was stripped away. She was strong, not because she never needed anyone, but because she was brave enough to admit when she did. She was resilient, not because nothing could hurt her, but because she knew how to heal. She was loved, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. "Thank you," she said to her father, "for coming when I called, for waiting 7 years for me to be ready to call, for not saying I told you so." "Thank you for calling," Richard replied, "for giving me a second chance, for letting me be part of their lives." He gestured to the triplets. Emma shrieked happily, her face still covered in frosting. Jack had fallen asleep in Marcus's arms. Lily snuggled against Victoria's chest, content and safe. Three babies who would grow up knowing they were loved, who would have choices and options and the freedom to make their own mistakes, who would learn from watching their mother that strength came in many forms, and asking for help was one of them. The party ended. Lauren and Marcus left together, bickering good-naturedly about whose turn it was to drive. Richard returned to the main house after kissing each grandchild goodnight. The caterers packed up. The sun finished setting. Victoria stood alone on the patio, three babies finally asleep in their cribs inside, and breathed in the evening air. 1 year ago, Derek Morrison had tried to take everything from her, her home, her money, her children, her dignity, but he'd failed. Because the things that mattered most, her strength, her resilience, her capacity to love and be loved, those things had never been his to take. She'd almost died giving birth to three babies. Her husband had proposed to another woman while she fought for her life. She'd lost her home, her money, her pride, and through losing all of that, she'd found herself. Sometimes the best thing that could happen to you was having your carefully constructed life fall completely apart, because then you got to rebuild it, not the way other people thought you should, not the way you thought you had to, but the way you actually wanted. Victoria's phone buzzed. A reminder for tomorrow. First day at Collins Investment Group. New job, new chapter, new version of herself that incorporated all the lessons she'd learned. She smiled and went inside to her sleeping children, to her life, to her future. Derek Morrison was in federal prison. Richard Hastings had his daughter back. Victoria Hastings had her children safe and her independence intact, and her family rebuilt on terms that worked for everyone. And sometimes, on quiet nights like this, Victoria allowed herself to feel grateful. Not for the pain or the betrayal or the near-death experience, but for the strength she'd discovered when everything else was taken away. She'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. And that was a victory no one could ever take from her.